Hello patrons, it's me Fleesveon. This is the first video tutorial that I'm gonna make. It's a test, so you can see if you prefer this format or you still like the image format. For this tutorial I'm gonna talk about textures and shading, so you may like and stay and learn about it. So first, my basic explanations come from a first already tutorial that we already sent before. You can have access to it from the link I have in the description. Now, what I'm gonna talk about now, well, I'm gonna go into more detail about the materials and how their shading is handled. So basically textures all vary in the way they are shaded. Basically is how light hits them. Some of them are more matte, some of them are more shiny, some of them are more rough, some of them are hard, some of them are soft, and we get this feeling thanks to the light. In order to get this texture feeling, we must know how much the light and how it affects our material. For example, I made some textures here similar to skin. The skin is not shiny, yet not so soft or hard, but is a translucent material. We know this because of the red tones that we see. Skin can vary in many colors, but I'm gonna just talk about the basics. This is basically what translucent means. Some other creatures may have this skin type, similar to jellyfishes, which are a little bit more transparent than us, and some geckos also have translucent skin. So, how do we get this feeling? So basically we got our base color, then we got our shading, we got our light, and we got our reflection tone. All of this together are a neutral shading. How do we make it translucent? Basically, we add a more saturated tone between the light source, between the shading, and the base color. Basically, around here. Let's say a red. Now we have a translucent material. We can tell there's a very strong red here, and we can tell this is a more opaque tone, and going more and more opaque, and we can tell this one is the most saturated of all. If we put this on a grayscale, you can see that there's no variation. It's not a darker tone. If you make a darker tone, you would see a darker shade here. But it's not. It's the same tone in a different color, in a more saturated color. How do we settle this up? So we basically see here our color wheel. When I chose this color, what I did was that I picked the color we have here, and I didn't change darker or lighter. I didn't do that. What I did was just make it more saturated, maybe more reddish, and that's how I chose this color. And then I just went ahead and blend. You can see this has a very skin-like texture. It's still vary. Some skins may be shiny, some not. So this is how you basically shade skin. But whatever you do next is the detail you want to add to it. This is just the basics. You can also see here, you can see a very saturated tone here, right here. Unlike this one, that's a more opaque color. This one has a more red vibe, more warm tones. This one has more blue tones. How do we get to this result? Is the same technique I showed here. We can apply that in our drawings. So I did here just the shading of skin so far. I did the light source with a multiply color on top, which was basically drawing your shading. This is how I drew it. So you first draw your shading, make sure that you know where the shading is going to be located. It's important to always do this first before getting into detail and all that. So we first get our shading done and we set it on multiply. This time we're gonna make it on orange. And you can already see what's going on. Later on, I went ahead with my more saturated tone. Here it is. It's a more saturated tone than the one that's our basic shading. And then we go ahead and blend whatever we want to blend. Make sure that not everything is fully blended. It will give a more solid feeling. Then what I like doing for shading is that I go ahead and select my shading. I invert selection and I create a shine layer, and later on do the same thing I did but with shine. There we go. We have a really strong like feel. After doing all this, we can like have our next details, have a reflective light. Let's say I want a purple reflective light, which is the one I'm looking for. I went ahead and added purple, whatever the purple light is coming from, which is basically reflection from my white tones that are here. That's where it comes from. And there we go. You can later on add more detail to your shading, create more texture feel. You can maybe go ahead and add a few pores, add a few wrinkles. It would depend.